Hello everyone, I'm here today to do my wrap-up for the month of February, and even though February is quite a short month, I did read a lot and there were several things that happened, including there was a short book challenge from my book club at the beginning of the month, and then Women's Prize, International Booker Prize, and also I was off work from the last 2 weeks of February, so I ended up reading 14 books. The first book that I finished was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by Schwab, and this is about this girl that never ages, and so she lives centuries and she kind of has to move from one place to the other because obviously she cannot live for 300 years in the same place without people getting suspicious of what's going on. And at the time that she was first born, that would have been a bigger issue because of sorcery things and stuff. She was born in the 1700s, so and that was not something to be proud of in the 1700s. And I found this okay. I think that I didn't connect with the character very much. So that took away from my enjoyment, and the way that it was done, it felt quite superficial. It was still fun, but it was not my favorite. Then the next book I finished was The Natural Way of Things by Charlotte Wood, and I read this as part of the Read Good Challenge for a pick for Australia, and I have a small video about it, so if you want to know more about my thoughts on this, you can go there. But basically this is kind of a dystopian book about this group of women that are kind of trapped by these men, and the ways that they collaborate to get rid of them, but also the ways in which each other have to second guess each other and stuff. It was interesting. I think it had a very good message. It was not what I thought it was gonna be based on the other Charlotte Wood that I have read. That was a lot more snarky and conversational than this was, but still this was a good book and I enjoyed it. And then we go to my short book weekend. I extended it a bit. I think it was from Wednesday to Friday, so 5 days, and I read 4 books. The first one I read was The Fearless Organization by Amy Edmondson, and this is a non-fiction, not quite self-help, but kind of self-helpy, about creating a safe environment at work that is able to harness the creativity of the people that work there. This was given to me as a gift from my job because I had participated in a think tank on how to improve social safety in the university. And yeah, there were some good advice here. It was also very well researched. The author is, I think, a professor or something on a university about the topic, so she knows a lot about it. It was very corporate though, which yeah, I'm not sure I enjoyed as much, but yeah, some interesting messages, and I think as I try to shape my career further, this might come in handy at some point. Then the next one I finished as part of that challenge was Emery Forever by Navarro Skaranger, translated from the Norwegian by Martin Aitken. And this is about a young girl that is pregnant, and she doesn't have a lot of support. Her boyfriend, whatever, doesn't want to be in the picture, and her mom helps her out, and then other men in her vicinity, like her boss and the like the clergyman, the priest of her community, they kind of start having feelings for her, and it does explore that misogyny of like seeing a pregnant teenager makes people it's okay to sexualize her, and it had a good commentary. Then the next one I read for that is Breakwater by Marijke Schermer, translated from the Dutch by Lyse Doucet, and this is about a woman that has like a very established life, but she's not happy about it. She feels very stuck, and then at some point something that happens triggers memories of her past that send her into a spiral of thoughts that are not healthy thoughts, and we kind of follow her on that. This is not the critique that I thought it was gonna be, and it's like the secret was very, or like the trauma secret thing was very anticlimactic for me. I didn't think it was that big of a deal, but I mean, of course, everyone can have trauma for anything that they feel it's traumatic, but yeah, it felt a little bit anticlimactic as well. So yeah, this one was okay. And then the last one that I read for that challenge was 3 Plastic Rooms by Petra Hulova, and this is a prostitute is kind of commenting on the materialistic side of life, and she uses a lot of popular culture and stuff. The chapters are named as TV episode 1, TV episode 2, and stuff like that, because it refers to a lot of films and TV and stuff. I'm not into that scene, so I didn't know a lot of the references, and also like I found the language was very crass, and I just felt that it was not. I know it was trying to shock, and I know that this author she often does that, but I just didn't find it very appealing. She called men's body parts hammers and women's body parts sticker inners. I don't know if that's like a translation thing, but I found it very cringy and weird. I mean, it still has some good messages and things, but overall, like the form just really didn't gel with me on this one. And then the Women's Prize for Non-Fiction was announced, and I have read 3 books this month on that topic. The first one that I read was The Finest Hotel in Kabul by Lyse Doucet, A People's History of Afghanistan. And the concept of this is that we follow the people that work in this hotel from the moment that they open until now. And they opened in 1969. And so a lot of things happened between 1969 and now in Afghanistan. And so we follow all of these things. This is a very highbrow, important hotel in the history of Afghanistan, because it's one of the hotels where a lot of politicians go and they make deals and things like that. And so it kind of is from the point of view sort of the people working in the hotel, and we kind of see them losing their jobs and gaining their jobs and being treated, especially the women, being treated in a way or another, or like the men had to grow a beard at some point because of the Taliban, and like the freedoms they have, the a little bit more on the everyday life, but still having that element of this is where normal people live and work, but it's also where historical people made deals, and so we have that little bit of extra. And it's also where most of the journalists that go to Kabul stay, and at some point it was like the only place that they were allowed to stay, and so yeah, it follows all of that, and I think it was well done for like explaining a little bit more on the history of Afghanistan. I have to say I did feel a little bit lost sometimes, because it kind of, there were points in which it kind of referenced the culture of Kabul and the nuances of Kabul, and it felt like an inside joke that only people that have lived in Kabul will get. And so in that sense, there were some points in which I was just a little bit lost on what we were trying to say or what the deal was. And I have to admit, I also don't know the exact history of Afghanistan from the 1969 until now, and the exact days and things, and so for that also I was sometimes because I didn't know exactly what had happened, and this book doesn't explain that. It assumes that you know, and then it just like puts that lens on it of like the everyday life of people, which that's on me, but it also took away a little bit of my enjoyment on this. But I think it's a good book, and I 100% see why it's in the list. And the author is a correspondent in Afghanistan, and she has been for a long time, so it makes sense that she will write this book. It's not like an outsider just deciding to write about Kabul. The next one I read from the list is To Exist As I Am by Grace Spence Green, and this is sort of a memoir, maybe medical memoir each of the author was, I think she was 22 and she was a medical student when there was a man that jumped from a third floor of a building and hit her, and from that moment on she became paralyzed from the waist down, and she is a wheelchair user, and she talks about the whole trauma of going through that and like the thoughts that she had at the time, but she also puts a lot of emphasis on the fact that she feels very grateful for her wheelchair, that is not a cage, is something that allows her to go out and do things, and her experience of how people treat her, and how she wants to be treated. So she says, for example, that a lot of the times people will talk to the person that is with her rather than at her, even though they are asking like, does she want to move this way, instead of telling her, do you want to move this way, things like that, and how inaccessible many things are even though they are supposed to be accessible, and how she has to call restaurants before she goes every single time to make sure that she can enter the restaurant, and things like that. And so she goes through a lot of the disabling features in our society, and the fact, but she also says how empowered she feels by the things that happened to her and the community that she has been able to find because of the things that happened to her, and that at the beginning she was just happy that she was able to save the life of this man that jumped, and now even if that was not a factor, she says, I wouldn't change anything because of all of the things that I have learned, all of the things that I have gained from being in this situation. She says, for example, that she had a lot of prejudice when she was learning in her medical school about what she was and wasn't able to do, like for example first aid courses. She was sometimes not allowed to try things because they assumed that she couldn't do it, and she talks about those difficulties, but she also says that because she's in a wheelchair, she's sometimes able to connect much better to her patients because they also see her as a patient, and so they are open a lot faster with her than with her colleagues. So she does have things that she has gained from being in this situation, and she does explain a lot of this thing to make people aware that they shouldn't feel sorry for her, and that they should just treat her as a person and like ask if she needs help and not assume things, like not assume that she always needs help, or not assume that because she's like experienced she doesn't help ever anymore. So just ask, do you need help and how can I help, rather than assuming that you know what she needs help with. And so yeah, it was very eye-opening, and she's also like she has a very introspective view on it as well, and about the care that she needs and the fact that she doesn't want to be independent anymore. The target is to be autonomous, so have the autonomy to decide things rather than having to do everything by herself, which is normally like what I also want to do most of the time. And this accident has taught her that sometimes you just need help, and that applies to everybody. And it's not, also another point that she made was that It's not that she is disabled, it's that the world is disabling to people that don't conform to a certain standard. Because we don't call people with glasses disabled, because we just have a solution that is easy and doesn't require a lot of accommodations. But we call disabled people disabled because they need accommodations to fit in our world, rather than us changing the world to fit those people, and then they wouldn't be disabled anymore because they can do everything that they want to do. So yeah, if you cannot tell, I really like this book. I think she's very smart and very eloquent in the way that she explains things, and the way that introspectively she found a way to express what she went through. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think it should be read by a lot of people. I don't know how well it will do in the price, because I think the form in which it was told, it was very eloquent, but it was not experimental in any way or special in any way, but still, like, the content and the thoughts that went into it are amazing, and I think it should be read by more people. And then the last one from the Women's Prize for Nonfiction that I read was Nation of Strangers by temelkuran, and this kind of talks about the idea of not having a place where you belong. So the author, she's Turkish, and because of the things that she was saying and writing about the regime, we can call it, in Turkey, she had to leave and she cannot go back. And so she talks about that feeling of never having a permanent place to live, because she was living in Hamburg for a while, and then she went to Berlin, and then London, and she's always on the move because she doesn't have a place she belongs to. She doesn't have a visa to stay for years in a place. She never unpacks her things anymore because she doesn't know where she's gonna be in a year, that kind of thing. And she also cannot go to Turkey, so she also doesn't have the option to go back home. And so she talks about all of that, which I think are very relevant topics, and I think it resonates with a lot of people. I definitely have felt that for a long time as well. I'm lucky enough that I don't need a visa in the European countries, so that was not an issue that I had to think about. But I was also never sure where I was going to be next or go next or all that stuff, because academic life is very much like that as well. But you do have the option to have a home to go back at least. So in that part, I think was well done and well discussed. However, she does come across as a very privileged person. She never had money issues, and it was not because she's also an academic and relatively well known. She didn't have visa issues too much. Like, she always had a visa, even though she did need a visa, and the visas were not very long. She was never like an illegal immigrant or anything. And there was some point that she was in a panel, and she talked about this feeling as her being homeless, and there was someone else in the panel that was like, no, you're not homeless, I'm homeless, I sleep in the street. And that is like a reality check for her, because it's like, you cannot use that word. Like, that word has an established meaning in a society, and you cannot use it to refer to what you're feeling. Although I understand like the logic of it, you cannot use it because it has an actual meaning that doesn't reflect your reality. So there were a few of other things like that made me think that she's like, she doesn't recognize her privilege as much. That yes, you don't have a home to go back to in the sense of a place you belong to, but you always have a house, you always have a job, you ended up always finding a way to get a visa. So it still comes from a relatively privileged place compared to the people that you are comparing yourself to. So that should have been a little bit more recognized, in my opinion. Then the next two books that I read are for the Lina North book club Patreon book club thing, and what she's doing is every 2 months we read 2 books that like talk to each other, and these are the 2 books for February and March. So the first one is From What Is to What If by Rob Hopkins, and this talks about how we should use our creativity more to reform the world, and instead of saying, oh, I wish that this was like this, or this is not working well, just try to find solutions and find ways to implement the solutions. And he puts a lot of examples of things that have been done to kind of uplift people and the environment without needing a lot necessarily. I think the idea was good, but I think that he also paints a picture of what is happening right now that does not match with what is actually happening. I do think that a lot of the things that he like the way that he talks about schools, for example, he talks a lot about schools, and maybe in the UK it's different, but here schools are quite free. And I know that in Spain also, like, these standardized tests don't happen until, like, they happen like twice in your primary school career. They don't happen every year. It's not as bad as he paints it. And I think, for example, in Alex's school, some of the kids, like the older kids, had this idea to write a book, and they have write and published a book, a very cute book, as a class effort, for example. And those kind of things happen a lot more than this book makes you think. But yeah, there were still some really interesting and important thoughts, I think, that could be gained from this book, and movements that exist that I would like to look more into and stuff like that. So I mean, I'm glad I read it. It's not a perfect book, but I'm glad I read it. And then the other one was a reread for me, and that was The Serviceberry by Robin Wall Kimmerer, which I read in audio. And this is basically Robin Wall Kimmerer is a biologist, and she's also a Native American. And she in her books she combines those two pots of knowledge to try to imagine a better world, let's say. And in The Serviceberry she talks about the economy of gifts, meaning that we should think of everything that we get and we give as a gift. So food is a gift from nature rather than a thing that you buy. And because her thinking is that if you think of things as gifts, you don't take too much. If you are invited to a friend's house and they tell you take whatever you want from the kitchen, you're not just going to raid their kitchen, right? You're going to take what you need and nothing more. And if they tell you, oh, you can buy whatever I have in my kitchen, then you will feel entitled to use everything if you want to, if you have enough money. And so it's a little bit of changing that mindset to think of things as gifts rather than as commodities, and that, according to her, often leads to being more respectful to the things that you have. And of course, like the examples that she has are mostly local, but she also makes the argument that we don't have to go global with everything. We can also just find our own communities and our own solutions in our own communities. Not everything has to be scaled up. There are a few examples of things that are scaled up, like libraries. Libraries are as close as you can get to a large-scale gift community. And so and if you think about it, indeed, people often have more respect for books from the library. Like, we don't normally write on library books. We don't like rumple the pages. We try to keep them pristine as possible. So yeah, it is correct. Like, I think she is right that we do treat things that are gifts to us a little bit better, and I do indeed try to include a little bit of that thinking to my own life and my own ways of doing things. And yeah, I found her very very eloquent always, so I enjoyed the serviceberry for the second time. Then I read 2 Becky Chambers this month. I read The Record of a Spaceborn View and The Galaxy and the Ground Within, which are books 3 and 4 on the Wayfarers series. And I read this because I needed some prompts to be filled in her kit, but also I have read the other 2 books like years and years ago, and I thought I could continue. And these books are not quite like a series, it's more like interconnected stories in the same world kind of thing. There are different characters and different settings in every book. And I mean, for me the first one is the best one by far of all of them. So this one mostly follows a bunch of humans, and in this world humans live in Mars mostly, I think, but a lot of them are exiled to their own spaceships because they mess up the Earth. And so we follow this group of humans trying to decide if they want to go live in land or they want to stay in their spaceships, and they also interact with other creatures of the world, and they kind of get their assumptions challenged. And this one is about a group of, I think it's 4 or 5 people from very different species trapped in this small planet because of a weather issue that happened. They kind of got isolated there for 4 days when they were not expecting to, and we see their interactions and the way they learn from each other. And from the 2, I think this one I prefer much more. I think this one is the closest to that it has gotten to me from this small way to the long way from the small angry planet. This is the closest one to it, and I think it's because we have this very wacky cast of characters locked in a very small space, and they have to interact and they have to learn about each other, and they do in very respectful ways. There is especially the tension between those 2 of those characters. One of them is from like the, let's say, elite race that conquers around everything and makes the rules and stuff, and the other one is from a species that got extinct by this race. So they now all live just in spaceships. They don't have a planet anymore because the planet was killed by that other race, and they have to come to terms with being in each other's spaces. And it's very interesting. There is this one character, Robek, that is like the kindest, nicest human. Not human, he's like a bug, a giant bug or something, but he's the nicest person that you can ever find. And we do find that at the end of the book they do connect with each other, and it feels a little bit like, you know, when you're young and you go to these summer camps for 2 weeks, and it's like the most important experience of your life, and all those people feel like they're gonna be your friends forever. This is kind of how this felt, because they were just trapped there for like 4 days, but they all became like really, really close, and they do good things for each other in the long term. So yeah, enjoyed my dose of cozy. And then the last book that I read this month is one for the International Booker long list, and that was announced also a couple of days ago, so I haven't had time to get any of the other books, but this one it was available to me electronically, so, and it's very short, so I read it, and that is She Who Remains by Rene Karabash. And this is an Albanian book. There is a lot of Albanian books coming around lately. I have read this one. I'm reading another Albanian book currently, and I have another Albanian book that I want to read soon. I don't know why, but it's just happening. And this one in particular it deals with sword virgins, and I had read a book about sword virgins before. It's basically the concept that, especially for people that lived in the mountains that are a little bit more traditional, that when a family doesn't have a son to follow their lineage, the girls are, one of them is expected to become a virgin for life and become like a man and just act and dress as a man and be the head of the house, and kind of, yeah, just like it's a very weird gender transition, because it's not necessarily sparked from gender identity and more about like outside politics, but you're kind of like forced to transition into being a man for the good of the family. That's kind of the basic concept. And in this book actually we have a family, and they have a daughter and a son, but the daughter, it is said that when she was in the womb she was always hearing, oh, my son, my son, my son, and apparently the word in Albanian for son and for blue is the same. So she when she was born she was a girl, but she kind of always had that thing in her mind that I'm a boy. So she actually was, it reads like she was trans, or he was trans, but not quite. I don't know, it's kind of weird, but she kind of always knew that she wanted to become a sword virgin, and she did at some point. She refused a marriage that was organized for her, and she became a sword virgin, and that was uncommon because she had a brother. He was younger, but she had a brother, but the brother was kind of, it's never quite explained, but he was described as like sickly and weak, so I don't know, maybe he was disabled or something, I don't know, but basically she became a sword virgin, and we kind of follow her and her brother, and one thing that is clear is that she was attracted to women, so maybe that's why she thought she had to transition. I don't know, it was like a very muddled situation. But basically, yeah, we follow these three people. So the main character, the brother, and the love interest, which is a woman, and we kind of follow the story of that family, because also when she refused to get married, there was a lot of tension between the two families, and her dad ended up being killed because of it. And yeah, it was interesting. It was I am glad that I read this after reading the other book about sword virgins, so that I already was familiar with the concept, because I don't think this book is the best entry point to understand that cultural practice, but this was a lot more literary and a lot more challenging and a lot more rich than the other one was. So I think it was also very poetic at points. There was like pieces that were just poems, and I think it played a lot of, not only with concepts and with plots and characters, but also with like the form in which it was written itself. And I'm really glad I read it. I really enjoyed it, and yeah, it was a very good read for me. So those are all the books that I read this month. I think it was quite a successful month. I will continue to read the Women's Prize for Non-Fiction and the International Booker, and probably the Women's Prize for Fiction when it comes out early in March. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments. Let me know if you have read any of these books and what you thought about them, or if you want to read them. And until next video, bye!